A lot has happened to the X-Men, in general, but particularly over the past decade or so. A lot of mutants have had their crack at being a part of the mutant race's premier superhero team, and we're gonna talk about them. Now, the mutant armor isn't a new X-Men member in the regular 616 universe, but recently, as in this year, 2024, the year of our Lord, thanks to the newly formed Marvel Ultimate Universe and Peach Momoko, we are getting a new interesting take on her character. Ultimate X-Men #1 stars Hisako Ichiki, aka Armor, as she first uncovers her mutant abilities. Now, first of all, Peach Momoko sets this story in Japan, and the whole thing is just this mix of cute but also very heavy and super cool. What's interesting about this take on Armor, and possibly the other mutants going forward for the Ultimate Universe, is how their abilities appear to be a bit more magically oriented. In the story, her powers appear to be almost supplied by a strange amulet she's given by a friend who then lost his life. Now, that's just me speculating. After a shadowy presence who people are guessing may be the Shadow King appears to Hisako, she is riding her bike away from where they met, and her power activates as a car nearly hits her, and her enormous armor stops it dead in its tracks. Definitely give that first issue a read if you get a chance, cause I glossed over a lot. Next up, Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not so great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, which is a silly name, where she would do battle with the X-Men. Now, gifted with skin that is extremely strong and resistant to attacks, Frenzy became an X-Men member in 2011 in X-Men Legacy number 250. Her steel-hard skin is so strong that it has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She is also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high-impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Now, speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons. And she can punch Jennifer Walters back if she really wants to. Frenzy has gone toe-to-toe with Rogue, arguably one of the most powerful X-Men, and she was classified as a level 6 threat by Cable, who helped hone her exceptional skills as a hand-to-hand combatant. Now, going back, if you need more incentive to read that new Ultimate X-Men, then I shall give you some. At the end of the very first issue, the cover of the second issue, which I haven't actually been able to read yet, features a completely new character who goes by the hero name Maystorm. Now, Maystorm is confirmed to have weather abilities and is clearly inspired by the revolutionary Storm from Ultimate Black Panther. Inspired by, but this is a wholly new character with their own unique design, and it seems the character will be joining both Armor and a few other characters that I'm going to talk about in a minute as the first new Ultimate X-Men team. Momoko created this character for last year's New Champions variant cover, but Maystorm will finally debut in Ultimate X-Men #2 of this year. Similar to Frenzy, Quentin Quire used to be a sort of villain back in the New X-Men. He spent his earlier years being an absolutely despicable kid who I always kind of wanted to just like kick in the shins. He was trying to be an anarchist leader of mutants and ended up doing more harm than good. After the schism of the X-Men, Wolverine took him to the school that he opened up. In a relatively short amount of time, Quentin became a more well-rounded character, and now he is someone I think is actually kind of cool. He still stayed a bit of a rebel and a narcissistic jerk, which you would think would make people hate him, but when he stops trying to cause anarchy, these traits end up becoming a fun aspect of his personality. Now, on Krakoa, he's back to annoying Wolverine and being pretty insufferable, but it's to a point where you kind of love him for it, maybe just a little bit. What's a little bit less fun is that recently, Quentin got his head lopped off and placed in an Orcus container designed to make use of mutant body parts by Sabretooth. Now, he recently called in the Exiles for help using his powers, so we shall see where that goes. Okay, I hope y'all don't mind, but I've got another of the new Ultimate X-Men that I'm going to talk about, and their name is Nico Minoru. Now, this is where things get really interesting and leads me to believe even more that these new X-Men will find some of their origins being influenced by magic and mysticism. Nico is a Japanese magical hero who uses the powerful Staff of One, and it's very interesting because on Earth 616, Minoru is not a mutant at all. In normal canon, she is a descendant of a magical family who are part of a cult. Nico steals her parents' staff after finding out that they are part of this cult, and she uses it alongside the team of teenagers known as the Runaways. Now, with full transparency, it is unclear yet if Momoko will be retconning Nico into being a mutant, or if the blending of magic and mutation in Ultimate X-Men will see her magical bloodline coming into play, but she does appear to be a part of this new team of X-Men that is forming, which is something I am excited to see play out. Next up, Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she had diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, including her intuition and her genius level intellect. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and has even displayed some telekinesis. M, or Penance, became a part of the X-Men in 2013 in X-Men Volume 4, number 7. Okay nerds, I have one more Ultimate X-Men to talk about, and then I promise we will keep talking about actual 616 heroes. Peach Pomoko's design sheets have also included two new mutants, Mori and Natsu, whose origins have not really been revealed at all, and we don't know much more than their names and their designs. However, the internet has still learned some things from that alone. The two biggest things of note about the information we have is that one of the names, Natsu, means summer in Japanese, and one of these new mutants has one blindfolded eye and one red eye, which is under some kind of visor device thing. Now Summer, as you might know, is a big name in the X-Men world, and with the red eye and all that jazz, fans believe that the character of Natsu could be a version of Cyclops or Scott Summers, or maybe a character at least inspired by Cyclops, although the design is different enough that the character will definitely stand as their own person. To be honest, that whole one eye thing is also kind of giving me Cable vibes, but I have no idea how that would even work, so for now, we're sticking with possibly Cyclops. Maybe. Now although he first appeared in 2007 and was briefly on the X-Men in 2009, as a 2018 recruit to the X-Men and X-Men Red number 4, Gentle is someone I kinda just love talking about, so I'm including him on the list. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle against a Sentinel and his strength is said to rival Colossus's, with his resting strength increased every time he uses his powers. Gentle is a very strong and powerful mutant, but the catch is that he only uses his powers in emergencies. Because of his poor treatment he suffered as a child, Gentle suffers great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos in Wakanda to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive. On top of that, Gentle has pacifist beliefs, but his calm, peaceful demeanor should not fool anyone because Gentle has used his abilities to halt the one Sentinel from destroying the Xavier Institute, and he's such a cool character. A listed X-Men member since 2017, Ankh sets himself apart from anyone else on this list by having the unique distinction of being a normal human being who received his powers through being tattooed by a mutant. Basically, the mutant who was the giver of his tattoos imbued those tattoos with powers, but the coolest thing about these powers is that they change into whatever tattoo he chooses to use. That's probably the worst way to explain it, so let me give some examples. Ankh can make others who touch him extremely sick using a biohazard symbol tattoo that he received on his hand. He used this one on some cops who tried to arrest him in a tattoo shop when he first showed up. He gained superhuman strength from a tattoo that mimics Colossus's osmium metal skin. 2 lightning bolt symbols on his temples give him low-level telepathy. He's got a tattoo of wings for flight, an explosion that lets him explode stuff, and a caduceus symbol that lets him heal others, among other tattoos. But the real show of how powerful he can be came when he got the Phoenix symbol as a tattoo that actually gave him Phoenix powers, which is nuts. His Phoenix Force symbol tattoo allowed him to defeat the Y-Men, and he keeps all these tattoos able to use whichever one he needs in the moment. It's awesome. But last on our list today is Old Man Logan. Now, most of you know this Logan from the Amazing Old Man Logan story and reality, where basically everything is ruined. The villains rule over everything with an iron fist in this wasteland. That is a whole story that we have talked about tons of times, but after the events of Secret Wars in 2015, crotchety old Logan made his way to the Prime 616 universe when main Wolverine had bit the dust, temporarily of course. Old Man Logan stepped in and sort of not really took over his place. Now this Logan didn't have the same berserker rage, and he was much wiser. The main difference was he didn't fly off the handle as often. He didn't go off on his own and do things that may have put his team in danger, and his biggest accomplishment may have been wiping out both the evil Hulk from his own world and another evil Hulk, Maestro, in Earth Prime. Unfortunately, Old Man Logan finally went to the afterlife in 2019, back in his home reality. Now when I say the name Pyro, most X-Men fans will think of St. John Alderweireld, who has been around since the 80s, but that's not who I'm talking about today. Simon Lasker is the newest version of Pyro, debuting in 2017. When Lasker first manifested his mutant powers, Mesmero appeared to him in the form of Charles Xavier and brainwashed him into taking the name Pyro and joining a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And this group of mutants were defeated by the X-Men, and the brainwashing was broken. From there, he went on to join the X-Men Blue Team. Lasker's powers were very similar to the original Pyro, with the only difference being that he could generate his own flame, not needing an existing flame for him to control. Unfortunately though, the character went to the pearly gates in 2020, not to be seen since. Meanwhile, the original Pyro went on to join the Krakoan Marauders. Debuting in Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2 Number 1 in March of 2014, Lynn Lee, aka Nature Girl, started off at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. When Kitty Pryde relocated the X-Men to Central Park and the school was renamed to the Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, Lynn Lee decided to join in. She became part of Jubilee's X team in Generation X Volume 2 Number 2 in 2017, but after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity was and is doing to the Earth and to nature, she instead became an eco-warrior fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world, so she can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, animals, plants, and natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the Earth. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities, and more recently, she mutated even more and became even more uncontrollable, but she looks pretty awesome, so we can let that kind of thing slide. Debuting in Powers of X Number 1, which released in early 2019, Rasputin 4 is one of the more interesting recent additions to the X-Men, but she's also one of the most overpowered. Created as possibly the most powerful of Mr. Sinister's chimeras, which were basically spliced together mutants who possess more than one hero's power, Rasputin 4 possesses 5 different powers. 5. She has the osmium metal skin of Colossus, the telekinesis and telepathy of Quentin Quire, the force fields of Gunther Bane, aka Unis the Untouchable, the intangibility of Kitty Pryde, and just to top it all off, she has the healing factor of X-23 Laura Kinney. So as you can imagine, she is a force to be reckoned with. And on top of that, she wields the Soul Sword. Currently, as far as I've read, Rasputin 4 is working pretty closely with Charles Xavier to fight back against Orchis and others during the fall of X. Now while she was initially controlled by Sinister, he himself undid that, and together the two actually saved the entire universe, with Rasputin doing most of the heavy lifting. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red Number 1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Now Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and she first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the highest earning CEOs in India. While I think that's pretty awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Now her limitations at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. Trinary was one of the mutants recorded to X-Corps by Mirage following the mutant massacre at the Hellfire Gala. With WizKid, Trinary helped to run X-Corps Island and keep it cloaked away from Orchis. Next up, Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men Number 1 in 2012, when we also first saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with her friends, and a boy, when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with said boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to just pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and took her in. She has been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which she uses as a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected, and she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over her powers from time to time, there is no doubt that she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Although initially introduced in 2010, Jimmy Hudson was actually the son of Wolverine and Magda Lencher, but crucially in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now he would go on to join that universe's X-Men as Wolverine following the passing of the original Wolverine, but then, following the events of Secret Wars, Jimmy found himself within the main Marvel Universe in X-Men Blue number 5, where he is tracked down in the Canadian wilderness by the time-displaced original X-Men, who he attacked believing they were working for Mr. Sinister. After fending off an attack by Sinister's new team of Marauders, the X-Men offered him a place on the team. Now Jimmy would remain a part of the team throughout the series, aiding them in various different missions, such as an adventure in outer space that saw him bonded with the Poison symbiote, and those two have been having a bit of an identity crisis. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are if we're being honest, Fabio Medina, aka Egg, and his battle cry Gold Balls is kind of awesome. Debuting in 2013, Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something, and it is hilarious. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, that's pretty odd, but these gold balls are actually more useful than initially thought. After he moved to Krakoa with the other mutants, it was discovered that Gold Balls' balls are actually infertile eggs, and if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. So yes, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at Sentinels and bad guys were actually infertile, bouncy golden eggs. Does it make me slightly uncomfortable? Yes, but he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was really cool. Next up, Gabby Kinney, aka Scout, also at one point known as Honey Badger, may be young, but she has more than proved herself when she became a part of the X-Men in 2018. Scout is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and a crazy regenerative healing factor that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine number 2 in 2015, and she had a long history that, just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura Kinney, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red number 1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout and one of the main Wolverine family members. Also, her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared a pretty immediate bond, and he is basically her pet and sidekick, which is just so cool to me. Becoming an X-Men member in 2012 in New Mutants Volume 3 number 45, Blank is the mutant leader of the Exiles, a group responsible for the repairing of timelines and worlds of the multiverse. She has the gift of teleportation, but unlike characters like Nightcrawler, Blank's teleportation abilities work through portals. This is really useful as she can teleport a whole group of people, and she can teleport others specifically through the use of javelin-like energy that she can throw at whatever or whoever she wants to teleport. These javelins can also be used to make opponents unconscious when it hits them. She is an exceptional fighter, having trained under Sabretooth, and she needs that skill, especially as she leads the Exiles. Also, fun fact, she had her live-action debut in the X-Men Days of Future Past movie. During that super awesome intro where the X-Men fight the Sentinels, Blink is the mutant throwing all the pink portals around and being awesome, and until she got then she stopped. And last up for today, Multiple Man is an interesting choice for this list, as he has been around for a really really long time in comics, but while he has been a hero for a good chunk of that time, he is still only a recent addition to the X-Men. Multiple Man was recruited in 2019's Uncanny X-Men Volume 5 number 13. Jamie or James Madrox is actually a changeling, which is sort of like a genetic precursor to mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of its own. One of the real benefits of this power though is that Prime Madrox will retain any memories of any of his dupes. So let's say you have to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all their memories of each book. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use his ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. He's definitely one of my favorite mutants. First appearing in Extraordinary X-Men number 17 in December of 2016, Lucid, aka Maya Jackson, was a mutant whose powers developed faster compared to most other mutants. By the age of 10, she had the ability to see through solid objects, and she had big aspirations to join up with her heroes, the X-Men. When the M-Pox crisis broke out, however, Maya was visited by Iceman and Magic at her family's home and was offered the chance to move to the safe zone of X-Haven in Limbo. Unfortunately, Maya's mother refused to leave her home, and Maya later fell ill to M-Pox, and her mother fled to X-Haven just a little bit too late. Maya's condition had worsened to the point that not even mutant healers could help her. With Maya on her deathbed, her sister managed to get the current leader of the X-Men, Storm, to meet Maya, and just a few moments before she passed away, Maya was officially made a member of the X-Men under the alias she had created for herself, Lucid. She may not be the most powerful of the characters on this list, but her story is pretty powerful, and I like it. Now this next mutant isn't very new to the X-Men, as he first appeared in New X-Men Volume 2 number 7 in December of 2004, but I actually didn't even know he existed until writing this list. His name is Paris Gavaskar, aka Indra. Indra comes from a region outside of Mumbai, India, and when his mutant power of being able to summon a retractable exoskeleton manifested, he enrolled as a student at the Xavier Institute and moved to the United States. Initially, Paris was placed on Alpha Squadron under the watchful eye of Northstar. Paris was one of the few mutants at the Xavier Institute to retain his powers after End Day, and he was one of the young mutants to take part in a sparring exercise to determine the new X-Men roster, despite the fact that he holds pacifist beliefs. He would later move to San Francisco with the other X-Men before being attacked, losing his powers, and then gaining a power boost, being able to produce psionic armor and offensive tools. He would side with Wolverine during the Schism event and relocated to Krakoa in the modern age. Next up, first appearing in X-Men Blue number 6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade, which is the coolest name ever, was part of the ruthless mutant vigilantes who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. This group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Now Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. That is super cool, but also kind of terrifying. She joins Polaris's makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue number 25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Now this one may be a bit of a controversial pick. Marvel has been doing some interesting things with the character of Kamala Khan recently. Kamala has been a favorite of many Marvel fans as Miss Marvel since her first appearance in 2014. When she first gained her powers, it was due to her being exposed to the Terrigen Mist and undergoing inhuman Terrigenesis. Kamala discovered she was now a polymorph and could change her body immune to virtually anything. Cool, so she's an Inhuman. She was mega popular and joined a bunch of different teams, including the Avengers. Very recently though, Kamala actually ended up biting the dust in a very high profile and pretty controversial move in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man number 26. But then, in X-Men The Hellfire Gala 2023 number 1, Miss Marvel was resurrected on the mutant nation of Krakoa. Charles Xavier then explains to Kamala that she was able to be resurrected because of her latent X gene, and that apparently he has known her to be a mutant for quite some time. Xavier explains that she is in fact a mutant and an Inhuman, something that should be impossible because the Terrigen Mists are supposed to take the lives of those who possess an X gene. But because Kamala underwent Terrigenesis, her X gene never actually manifested her powers yet. Now she's running around with the X-Men, admittedly not doing very much. Angelica Jones, also known as Firestar, has the awesome mutant ability of microwave energy manipulation and generation. She uses the Earth's magnetic field and converts it into microwave radiation. She also absorbs microwave radiation from her environment and from stars in the galaxy. She can then focus this energy at targets or to do different things. She can set targets on fire, explode them, and even melt them. She is constantly keeping her powers in check because she has the potential to damage the entire Earth and its atmosphere with her abilities, which is why she is even more powerful in space, where she isn't limited by the fragility of the Earth. Now, Angelica first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 193 in February of 1985, but crucially, she was actually a villain. She was loyal to Emma Frost and her school of mutants, and would be on the Hellions, the New Warriors, the Avengers, and the Young Allies before she joined the X-Men in Amazing X-Men Volume 2 number 1 in 2013. And she has been on different iterations of the team, even serving as the secret double agent within Orchis during the current Fall of X event. Speaking of the Fall of X, when Orchis made their attack on Krakoa at the most recent Hellfire Gala, it was quite literally just as the new team of X-Men were finally announced. Among that team of mutants was Prodigy, aka David Alain. Growing up, David was always bright and intelligent, but when his mutant powers activated, his intelligence seemed to double and answers became almost instant for him. That's because his mutant ability is to telepathically absorb the knowledge and skills of anyone nearby. I wish I had that power. Although he first appeared in 2003, he was first placed on Moonstar's New Mutants training squad and went on to join the New X-Men in 2008, and has been on X-Factor Investigations, New Mutants, the Champions Reinforcement roster, the Young Avengers, the New Mutant Squad, all before finally making it onto the actual premier X-Men team, only to be completely obliterated by Nimrod. Sorry. Now, all the way back in the day, when Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X-gene and abilities were activated following M-Day. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. Ije Onkokwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta State when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her entire village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope Summers and with the consent of Cyclops, Okonkwo, who took on the name Oya, and the other Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Oya's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold, and vice versa. Now, Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010, and under the name Tempest, she will be joining a new group of X-Men led by Cyclops later this year, alongside another interesting new X-Man. Although Kane Marco, also known as the Juggernaut, has been around since 1965 and had an on-again, off-again relationship with the X-Men ever since Uncanny X-Men number 425 from June of 2003, when he first joined the team, it never really stuck. He would return to a life of villainy, usually thanks to Sidorak, who isn't really a fan of helping people. Therefore, it is totally valid, in my mind, to say that Juggy only really joined the X-Men for reals in Uncanny X-Men Volume 5 number 16 from 2019. The X-Men were fighting the latest incarnation of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, led by an imposter Magneto. Juggernaut didn't like that he was working for an imposter, so he took down the imposter and decided to join the X-Men. He would be voted on to the newest incarnation of the X-Men at the most recent Hellfire Gala before almost the entire team was brutally decimated by Orcus. When Marvel relaunches their X-Men titles in the summer of 2024, this year, Juggernaut is on the roster for the main Cyclops-led X-Men team alongside Beast, Magneto, Psylocke, Kid Omega, Temper, and Magic. But speaking of the X-Men relaunch that is happening, we are getting 3 main X-Men titles. There is just the X-Men, which is the team that Juggernaut is on, led by Cyclops, but we will also have the Uncanny X-Men, which is a team led by Rogue, with Wolverine, Gambit, Nightcrawler, and Jubilee, and in Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero's Exceptional X-Men, Kate Pryde, Shadowcat, will become a mutant teacher again in Chicago, working with Emma Frost, and 3 entirely new young mutants named Bronze, Axo, and Melee. Being so new and with their book not starting for a few more months, we actually have basically no information on any of these mutants. The only thing I could really find here is another character named Melee, who first appeared in 2007 as part of the Civil War 50 States Initiative, and she doesn't have any information outside of that era of Marvel, and she wasn't even a mutant that we know of. So it seems that this new Melee and her 2 new X-Men newbies are freshly created for the new Exceptional X-Men title, so I'm excited to learn more. But finally, we arrive at Synch. Synch has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Synch can copy the powers of other mutants. But unlike Rogue, Synch has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Synch got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Synch not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but he's also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is on Mars. Synch's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Synch documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Synch even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredibly significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's hard to be surprised that he's getting power boost. Number 10. Armor. Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki, is actually a pretty powerful X-Men, even in the 616 universe, who can create a psionic exoskeleton suit of armor. This exoskeleton is incredibly strong, durable, impenetrable, and it's fueled by energy from Hisako's ancestors in the 616 universe. But not in the Ultimate universe, no sir. In this universe, Armor's exoskeleton takes the shape of giant animals and even dragons sometimes. Oh, and also in 1610, her exoskeleton is fueled by 10,000 mythological Japanese spirit demons. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Armor is cool and powerful enough that when the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, she was able to slip her way into the 616 Prime Universe, until she was kidnapped by Miss Sinister and eventually lost her life in X-Men Blue number 28 in 2018. Number 9. Firestar. Honestly, Firestar is one of those flame-wielding mutants that kind of flies over my head a lot of the time. Usually I think of Pyro, but in the Ultimate Universe, Pyro is actually not resistant to his own flames and therefore is covered in scar tissue and has like no nerve endings. But Firestar, in both 616 and the Ultimate Universe, is way cooler. Or I guess technically hotter, because fire. Ironically, her character actually had a huge phobia and hate of mutants, until her powers of microwave energy manipulation manifested, which seems to actually take the form of pyrokinesis in this universe. Her whole body can engulf in flames that she is thankfully resistant to. It allows her to fly and surprisingly burn things and people. Like when the super creepy Ultimate Wolverine tried to hit on her and she threatened to burn his nipples off. Number 8. It's Wolverine. I am gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his Prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear bomb. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men, although it may have also been because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30. Number 7. Psylocke. Colonel Betsy Braddock of Strike is England's most powerful telepath, capable of reading minds, creating psychic grenades that explode in the minds of others, and one of her coolest powers, brandishing a purple psychic energy blade. She was once possessed by the mutant David Xavier, but she was strong enough to overpower him momentarily, which, if you know anything about him and his level of power, is not something to scoff at. When Colossus dropped a car on her, her consciousness was powerful enough to jump into the body of a coma patient named Quanon, kind of calling back to how Betsy and Quanon share a connection in the main 616 universe. Number 6. Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. Now, in the Ultimate Universe, it turns out doing this on a mutant to the point of hitting the end of the line will actually permanently transfer those powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. The first time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities, plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. She would use those abilities to help the X-Men. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde, as we know her, is known for her ability to phase herself and others through solid matter. She also has the ability on Earth 1610, but in this universe she discovered she can also minimize the negative space around her atoms, becoming super dense and granting herself extra dimensional mass, giving her enough strength to smash through concrete and metal and punch Spider-Man through the air, making her as hard as diamond and able to withstand attacks from the Phoenix, and making herself weigh 90 tons at peak mass. But that's as well as her phasing ability, which can allow her to walk on air and water. And that's before her exposure to Giant Man Serum to fight Galactus that leveled her up even more, allowing her to increase in size and gain a healing factor. Definitely one of my favorite Ultimate X-Men, and not just because of her romance with Peter Parker. Alright, number 4, Storm. The Omega level mutant known as Storm has a little bit of a different backstory compared to her main universe counterpart. On 1610, Aurora Monroe was an immigrant from Morocco who was found by Professor X living in Athens, Texas, where she'd been stealing cars for a living. When she took a 1978 Mustang for a joyride, the police finally caught up with her, and Aurora used her powers to create a lightning storm to escape. Unlike her main universe counterpart though, she didn't have the training yet to control her powers to such a high degree, and put some children in danger when she summoned the lightning storm, which eventually allowed the police to catch her. Xavier sent Jean Grey to convince the Athens authorities that Aurora was actually an FBI agent and that she was sent to relieve them of the mutant, and she went on to join the X-Men. She is much more sarcastic and rebellious, and also had relationships with both Beast and Wolverine. She didn't just create storms, she created drama. Number 3. Iceman. In the 616 reality, Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, was one of the original X-Men and has achieved the classification of Omega level with his powers of cryokinesis and hydrokinesis. Now, in the Earth 1610 reality, he is actually one of the youngest members of the group, and it's almost as if he was kind of given a power boost. I know that doesn't make sense. How can you like boost an Omega level character? You can't. But he wields his powers in more interesting ways. He has always been able to transform his body, but he also creates gigantic ice trolls and ice walls. He's proven his worth by stopping a Weapon X invasion and the Ultimates all on his own. Professor Xavier himself has claimed that Iceman is one of the 3 most powerful X-Men, and he's probably not wrong. But I do gotta say, I don't know what they were thinking giving him the do-rag. I don't get it. Number 2. Professor X. In the Ultimate Universe, much like in the main one, Charles Xavier was the most powerful telepath on Earth, possessing vast psionic abilities, and was known as one of the most powerful mutants ever. His mutant abilities give him telepathy, astral projection, and this version experiences some telekinetic skills as well, unlike his 616 version. He is also a genius with skills in surgery, therapy, and biochemistry. The only thing that I would say is both kind of a power boost and a bit of a caveat is the fact that while he's a good guy, he is also somewhat corrupt, or like very corrupt, as well as very manipulative. He willingly reads and messes with the minds of others, like Bobby Drake, who had a girlfriend when he first joined the X-Men who almost convinced him to leave the team, so Xavier erased her from Bobby's memory. It's kinda really messed up. He even created the mutant drug Banshee. Like, sure, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but that doesn't really make it okay, you know what I mean? And number 1, it's Jean Grey. Did you think it was going to be anyone else? As an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic, she is already a pretty tough character to take on. But as almost all of us know, Jean Grey is the host for the Phoenix Force, and that still remains the case here on Earth 1610. Only, she seems to use even more of that power. Unleashing a small fraction of her power melted the armor of Apocalypse, but her full might against him tore him apart atom by atom, causing him so much pain Apocalypse begged her to stop. Apocalypse begged her to stop. As the Phoenix, she reversed time, read people's minds, saved the whole team multiple times, and took off into space, literally traveling to what was essentially heaven. There is a reason people fear Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force gives them all the more reason to poop their pants.
Number 10. Bishop. Bishop's powers are based in energy manipulation, as so many other heroes from his time period were. And no, I don't mean the future, I mean the time in which he was created in the comics. The 90s. What a time. Still, Lucas Bishop is one of the few heroes who withstood the test of time and is currently a main character in the comics today, appearing as part of the Marauders team and as Red Queen Kitty Pryde's Red Bishop within the Hellfire Trading Company. I'm so happy that Bishop got to be a bishop. It's too perfect. It's so perfect. Bishop is considered an alpha level mutant and is often known for brandishing his future XSE guns, which he can recharge with any energy he has absorbed and stored. Pretty useful. We're talking near unlimited ammo, as long as he has some kind of energy coming his way. Number 9. Wolverine, aka Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23. Laura has since taken up the mantle of Wolverine after her genetic father Logan. She too is now known as Wolverine, so we get to have 2 of them on the island of Krakoa. Yay! Just like that, they gave Laura that title, but didn't feel like they had to take it away from her after Logan himself was using it again in his own self-titled series. It feels very respectful to let her keep it. Also, Laura definitely deserves our respect, as she is not only extremely durable like Logan, possessing her own healing factor, but is also an immensely skilled and deadly fighter, who you would likely not want to mess with, being trained since birth. Wolverine is currently part of the newest X-Men roster, featured in the 2021 book, but has also been an ally and member here and there throughout the years. And before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show up by clicking that like, and we've got a little announcement for you. We have a new channel coming your way. What? It is called Top 10 Nerd Elite, and if you want all that good bonus content, you need to go over there and you need to subscribe. Number 8. Sync. Everett Thomas just recently saw an amazing power boost in the comics. So amazing in fact that it actually took me forever to collect the issue in which it was featured, issue 18 of the previous X-Men run from 2019. Don't worry though, I finally tracked it down, so my collection as such is complete. Perfect. And honestly, I get why it was such a highly coveted issue. It also features Sync's rainbow aura that shines through when he is using his ability and syncing up with other mutants. Up until recently, Sync's powers gave him the ability to temporarily take on the powers of mutants near him, syncing up with them. But as of issue 18, he can now sync up with any superhuman being. And it's also been implied before that with more experience, he could take on the powers of others for longer and perhaps even permanently. Number 7. Wolverine. He's the best there is at what he does, bub. So of course Logan has to make our cut. Wolverine is one of the most popular mutants and X-Men members out there the world over, which gives him a pretty big boost when it comes to what he's capable of. Wolverine might not be Omega or even Alpha level, but he never backs down from a fight, and is not to be underestimated, as he's probably one of the most determined and often noble heroes around. Sure, you might be able to beat him initially, but due to his insane healing factor, Wolverine Wolverine will often just get back up and keep coming back for more. He's also a super skilled fighter. On more than one occasion, he's taken a bullet to the head and after a few moments managed to recover and get right back up. In alternate realities, we've also seen Wolverine bombarded with energy blasts until he was nothing more than a skeleton, and he still managed to come back from that. Wolverine is tough as nails, but with a heart of gold, which is what makes him such a great X-Men member and just an overall great character. Number 6. Polaris. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto, and with that comes a lot of power and honestly probably a lot of pressure as well. Still, Lorna handles the pressure fairly well and all the other stuff that comes with being Magneto's daughter, like her mind being manipulated when she was a child. Okay, so maybe she didn't handle that whole reveal so great, but she definitely shows just how resilient she can be whenever she has to deal with some of the more challenging parts of being Magneto's heir. Polaris's powers are similar to her father's, allowing her to manipulate magnetic fields, and she is considered an alpha level mutant. More recently in the comics, while using her abilities and with the help of Krakoa, she built the X-Factor's new headquarters on the mutant island nation all in one night. Pretty impressive stuff. Number 5. Juggernaut. Juggernaut is one of the most powerful characters out there in the comics, and while he might not be a mutant and is known for being in fact a longtime X-Men villain, neither of these things stopped him from eventually joining the team. This was all around the time that Juggy had lost most of his powers, with Kane having a falling out with Sidorak and ultimately deciding to patch things up with his stepbrother Charles Xavier. He joined the X-Men and during his time there surprisingly made a good number of friends, including the mutant known as Squid Boy. Poor Squid Boy. R.I.P. who would attempt to blow the whistle when he found Kane in a meeting with the Brotherhood. Kane actually was operating as a mole, hoping to play along long enough to learn of the Brotherhood of Mutants' plans and warn the X-Men of them. Such a tragic story! Number 4. Magneto. Magneto obviously has to make our cut. Despite being a powerful X-Men villain, like Juggernaut, he too has been an ally to the team and even at one point was a member. Magneto had a few instances where he worked alongside the X-Men and even at one point saved them from imprisonment. He eventually attempted to join up with them but was initially denied membership by Professor X. Later, however, Magneto would ally himself with the team during their time together on Battleworld and eventually would end up joining the team and acting as a leader of sorts after Professor X was injured. During his time on the team, Magneto would also become the teacher of the New Mutants, which I love. Number 3. Storm. Storm is of course one of the most powerful mutants out there, and definitely one of the most powerful X-Men members. Not just for her amazing powers either, but also for her skills as a leader and a fighter. Recently during the pre-Hellfire Gala issue of Marauders, in honor of their valuable teammate Storm, the Marauders came together to share their favorite Storm stories and moments. We also learned just how dangerous Storm can be even without her powers, and as awesome as she is with them, I think some of my favorite Storm moments recently have actually involved her fighting hand to hand, or with her famous and perhaps endless supply of knives. We still don't really know for sure how many knives Storm has on her at all times. At the very least, we know it's 8 though. And if you want to check out that very heavy Storm issue of Marauders, you can check it out in issue 20. Number 2. Marvel Girl. Marvel Girl is one of the greatest and most powerful X-Men members out there, and really no powerful X-Men members list can be complete without her. Sadly, sort of, as I did want Storm to take my number 1 spot on this list honestly. I was really like, I really want to make Storm number 1. Jean Grey has done a lot of good and a lot of bad, but whatever side she happens to be on as Marvel Girl, Phoenix, or Dark Phoenix, the fact remains that she's always pretty unstoppable. Unless, of course, she wants to be stopped. Even back when she was originally introduced in the comics, back in issue number 1 of the Uncanny X-Men, she stood out, at least to me, as having the most potential in terms of her powers and power levels. Of course, then she'd later succumb to a bit of Princess Peach syndrome, as she would constantly be the member of the team who'd get kidnapped or in some cases be rendered useless because of the limits of how much she could mentally lift being tied to how much she could physically lift, which I don't know, doesn't seem like it should be a thing, but it was a thing at the time. Though later on her limitations could probably be explained away by the mental blocks Xavier had placed in Jean's mind to protect her and others from her insane raw power, which we'd learn about later, of course. And friends, if you also love Jean Grey as much as we love Jean Grey, we also have a really awesome Jean Grey alternates list, so if you want to learn about more powerful versions of her, you should go check that out. It's a good time. Number 1. Tempest. Just because it's hard for me to always succumb to Jean being number 1. Even though I know she deserves it, I know she's number 1, we have Tempest at her number 1 spot today. Because Tempest could literally undo anyone just like that. Like she did with Matthew Malloy, who is set up to be pretty much the most powerful mutant in all of existence, I'd say. His reality manipulation was off the charts. And yet Tempest was able to defeat him by traveling back in time to make sure his parents just never met. Her ability allows her to create time bubbles in which she can control the flow of time. She can slow or speed up time as much as she wants within the bubbles, and can also use her chronokinesis powers to time travel. Time travel initially for Tempest was a little tricky, as her emotions have been shown to affect her abilities, but she has also spent years working to hone them. So at this point in time, she's definitely someone you wouldn't want to piss off. Otherwise, you might go to bed one night and then never wake up again, because Tempest decided to erase you from existence. Number 10. X-Force. X-Force is known for being one of the most ruthless mutant and X-Men related teams in the comics. It was initially more Cable's team and was used like a sort of time police force to remove threats to the timeline. However, as time went on, the name became repurposed and is now more associated with someone like Wolverine, known for being a sort of mutant black ops team, usually that he leads. Currently, Krakoa is equivalent to America's CIA, and in fact very currently, as of right now in 2022 at the time of this recording, the team is more Hank McCoy, Beast's team, which has recently moved out of the shadows, with Beast deciding to no longer basically hide all the morally questionable, super shady decisions that he's been making to eliminate threats and keep Krakoa safe. Although sometimes it seems like his true aim may actually be something more sinister, because it is an interesting way of trying to keep people safe. And friends, before I move on to my next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love the X-Men, then we have a playlist for you. It's our X-Men playlist. Go check it out and you can watch all the X-Men content that we've done. Done a lot. Number 9. Brotherhood of Arakko. There have been a couple of X-Men Red teams over the years in Marvel Comics, but for the purpose of this list, we're focused on Storm's Brotherhood that she brought together during her time as ruling regent out on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars before the mutants terraformed it and claimed it for themselves and their people. They appear mainly in the book X-Men Red, which is why I'm referring to them as kind of like X-Men Red, though really the title for this book is a bit of a misnomer when it comes to Storm's team. Well, you could call Storm's Brotherhood this book's main team, and thus X-Men Red because that's the name of the series. It seems initially this was more in reference to the team Abigail Brand tried to put together, but kind of failed to really have takeoff, with Storm's team taking prominence instead. The team initially consisted of Storm, Magneto, the Fisher King, and Sunspot, but now that Magneto is gone, also includes Cora the Burning Heart and Wrong Slide. Also includes Cora of the Burning Heart and Wrong Slide, a resurrected Rock Slide who came back different after he was killed in Otherworld. Number 8. Avengers Unity Division. The Avengers Unity Division is basically a combination of X-Men and Avengers, which makes it pretty OP. At least it was a combination of both these teams when it first started. The team was created by Captain America as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. After the fallout, Cap felt pretty bad about basically not really helping the mutants more in regards to promoting them towards humanity and making sure that the world over did not really hate and fear mutants. At least, he felt as responsible as he, as one man, could do. But he's a pretty influential guy, so he was like, maybe I should have been helping you guys more. In an effort to do this now, he decided to bring together Avengers and X-Men to work together, creating the Avengers Unity Division. Later on, Inhumans would even be added into the mix as well, so really this team is all about bringing people from different worlds who maybe don't always see eye to eye together, which is a really beautiful sentiment when you think of it. On the initial team, which was known editorially as Uncanny Avengers, we had Captain America leading and joined by Havoc, Thor, Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Wolverine. Rogue and Scarlet Witch were an especially challenging combination of characters to have on this team, as Rogue vehemently hated Wanda for what she had done to mutants during House of M, and saw her basically as a villain. In fact, most mutants did at that time, so this was in general a powerful team on paper, but one that also came with a lot of issues and a lot of baggage, to be honest. Of course, that's what makes it so interesting to read, right? We're here for the drama. Number 7. Great Ring of Arakko. The Great Ring of Arakko is exclusively made up of Omega level mutants, which really tells you how much of a powerhouse team they would be. They are the ruling body of Arakko, which is the sister mutant island nation to to Krakoa. In fact, Arakko and Krakoa are kinda like less siblings and more romantically tied. Ooh, romantic islands that are in love with each other. Both are sentient mutant islands, and for a long time they were actually attached to one another, literally and romantically, and were also in love with each other. Although now, they actually prefer to be separate. They've been separate for a long time and they're like, you know what? The spark, it's gone. Arakko's ruling government has 4 distinct sections, which govern different parts of their civilization, with some areas having more power at given times. For example, in war times, Dawn is the area that typically gets more say, as this is the area that Dawn rules over and governs. The war times. For years, the Araki were at war with Amenth, so this would have been a very prominent section for many years in the past in terms of their ruling body. And it's something that the mutants of Arakko struggle with releasing themselves from, the obligation to always be on guard and kinda always be at war with people. While Uranos recently cleaned the clock of the Great Ring of Arakko, that should not undermine their strength, as Uranos is basically on a whole other level by himself as one of the most powerful, ruthless, and I would say evil Eternals that we've ever seen. And I know people would probably like put the X-Men above the Eternals or mutants above Eternals, but let me tell you, the Eternals are still pretty powerful, so we gotta respect. Number 6. Versus Inhumans Unity Team. Inhumans vs X-Men was an interesting time, to say the least. We basically had to come up with a reason for these two groups to fight one another, which we did by making the mutants deathly allergic to Terrigen mists, which had actually been released around the world, which ended up killing, a lot of mutants. As a result, Emma Frost made a martyr out of Cyclops, using him to propel forward her own plot to eliminate the threat of the Inhumans. She ended up being one of the main leaders of this team, which was sort of a unity squad, bringing together all mutant-related X-teams, primarily Magneto's X-Men, an X-Men team with past versions of the characters, and a more current X-Men team, in addition to some other mutants who have served on X-Men teams before. Number 5. Sword Bearers of Arakko. I mean, when you consider the Sword Bearers of Arakko, we're all pretty much kicking the champions of Krakoa's butts, kinda have to put them high up on this list, right? Well, the Araki are newer when it comes to the mutant status quo, and what we consider to be, an X-team, considering we kinda just met them, and they are loosely tied to the X-Men through both their connection to Apocalypse and, being mutants. At the end of the day, they are still mutants, and for that reason, I think we can include them on this list, because this list for me is really more about mutant teams. That's what it's really about, more than, specifically X-Men sister teams or X-Men rosters, which we could do, but I don't know. I feel like to me that's a different list. We just use the name X-Men here because it makes more sense in relation to Marvel mutants, and is more appealing than if, we just put Marvel mutants in the title of this video. You dig me? The Sword Bearers of Arakko didn't just best their Krakoan competitors in contests of combat and wit, but also in some of the more charismatic and just straight up strange contests. Also beating them in a dancing competition, a runway model one or like a fashion show contest, and a scavenger hunt, to name a few of those seen in X-Force issue number 14 of that 2019 series, during the 10 of Swords event. Oh man, I love 10 of Swords. Number 4. The Five. The Five have to be one of my favorite teams to this day. They also in essence stand to represent this current era of X-Men, which seems sadly finally be coming to a close. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad to see it end. I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm gonna need a box of tissues whenever if we do a video about that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be crying the whole time. The Five are iconic in this way because they represent the power mutant kind now holds, the power over life and death. Mutants can resurrect other mutants, and not just that, they can resurrect other people as well, as it turns out, non-mutant people. So they don't just decide who lives and dies in regards to other mutants, but can also pass this judgment on to all the people of Earth. The Five are the team that allows this to happen. They're led by Hope Summers, and the roster includes Egg, Proteus, Tempest, and Elixir. Together, these 5 teammates can resurrect mutants by creating eggs and imbuing those eggs with life, growing clones of mutants who have died, and using their powers to not just recreate them physically, but also to recreate them on a genetic level, giving them back their powers and even modifying them to be as they were in real life. For example, Wolverine having his adamantium-coated skeleton, which is not part of his powers, but something he got later in life, they can do that that and also give him those sweet adamantium claws. In addition, the Five also use backups Professor X keeps on Cerebro for all mutants to restore their memories as well, so that they are in essence the same person who died recently. Although the question of what this means for their soul is still something that I think we're considering, and I wonder if that will have repercussions after we end this era. Who hasn't died? That's gonna be the real question. Who hasn't died yet? We should do a list on that. Number 3, Extinction. The Extinction team truly is a scary one. They were around at a time when the Phoenix Force was believed to be returning to Earth. It was thought that the Phoenix Force wanted to merge with mutant Messiah Hope Summers and have her act as its host. While the X-Men were more optimistic about the Phoenix's return, the Avengers were not so optimistic. As a result, the mutants deployed their own team to fight against the Avengers, but which was initially also created to defend the mutant island of Utopia and, honestly, the world against extinction level threats. Hence the name, the Extinction Team, you know what I mean? The Extinction Team included Cyclops, Magneto, Namor, Storm, Dagger, Magic, Hope Summers, Emma Frost, and Colossus. Talk about a powerhouse lineup. Never mind the Phoenix Force, this team in and of itself seems frightening enough to justify the Avengers' concern, assuming they don't trust the mutants having power, which, while at times both teams have been allied, has always seemed to remain a bit of a touchy subject to the Avengers, who have a history of not playing well with other major superhero teams in the Marvel Universe, to be honest. In fact, they also even have a history of not playing well with each other within their own team, so yeah. Me just throwing shade at the Avengers. Number 2, the Phoenix Five. 5 seems to be a magic number when it comes to the mutants. While the Five, as they are simply known, are all about life and resurrection, the Phoenix Five have the potential to just straight up destroy worlds. Or I suppose they could also save them, if they can avoid being corrupted by the Phoenix's power, that is. The Phoenix Five are what some members of the Extinction Team become after the Phoenix Force arrives on Earth. During a fight with the Avengers, the Phoenix Force is split into 5 pieces, when Iron Man attempts to destroy it. These pieces end up merging with 5 hosts, creating the team we know as the Phoenix Five. Of the Extinction Team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, and Colossus are the ones who end up as the Phoenix's hosts, dividing the team. While initially the members of the Phoenix Five attempt to use their newfound power for good, they all end up kinda getting corrupted, with other members also stealing their power until it is all combined into one host, ending with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. We all know how that went. Professor X ended up as a dead guy.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Come binge some more top 10 nerd content by clicking this video next. It's about the most power superhero teams that you've never heard of before. Click the video now to find out more.